Hello everyone. In today's video, in lieu of having class, I am just going to quickly run through with you some research strategies for your synthesis paper and how to write an annotated bibliography. You will notice that I have posted two assignments, your topic proposal and your annotated bibliography. Obviously, your topic proposal should come first because it is hard to do a bibliography if you don't know what you're researching first. So please do watch this video and then go and do those two assignments. So let's get started. Your synthesis paper is going to need some research. We already talked a little bit about this, about what topics you can choose, about what kind of the goal here is to enter into a conversation. So you're going to have to do some research. And first of all, you need to kind of understand why we research in general. And if this was being held in a class, we would take some time to stop and, brainstorm ideas about how and why we research. So I want you to take just a minute to yourself and think about, why is research necessary? Why do we in academic writing bother to do research? And we've gone over some of the obvious answers to this. You're writing into a conversation. You have to demonstrate that you understand that conversation. You'll be more credible if you know what's going on in that conversation. But see if you can come up with any ideas for yourself. Take about a minute or so, jot down some notes. So, ultimately, real research delves deeper than just finding isolated facts. Research is about investigating profound, complex issues. It's not just, well, I need to know this date, or I need to know this snippet of information. You may find answers when you research. You may also just find more questions. And on a practical side, doing research builds skills in synthesizing information, prioritizing information, note-taking, finding and using sources, and complex reading skills. So this is the part of the semester where you're really going to bring to bear all of your metacognitive skills, your critical reading skills, your analysis skills. All of that is going to come to bear on this synthesis project. So spend the next few minutes, if you haven't already, brainstorming potential topics. What do you want to write about? And you can start by thinking about what communities are you a part of, and what are some issues that you've encountered in those communities? What are some topics of conversation that come up in those communities? Are there other kind of hot topics or current issues that matter to you personally, or that you've encountered and find really interesting but don't really know much about? This can be a great opportunity to write the kind of paper about a topic that you've always been interested in, but you've never really had time to delve more deeply into. This can be a great paper to work through some of that kind of thing. So just like we did with our very first paper with the literacy narrative, start by coming up with a list of 5 potential topics. You don't need to have a thesis worked out yet, just come up with a list of general topics and then start narrowing down from there. So now that you have a topic or a potential topic, the next step is to develop a research question. Research questions help you focus your research by providing a path through the research and writing process. The specificity of a well-developed research question helps you avoid the all-about paper and work towards supporting a specific and arguable thesis. So a research question is the thing that prevents you from writing about everything on a topic. So remember that in this kind of essay, you're doing a narrow and deep dive, which is why when I had you kind of work through those sample sources, I didn't choose climate change, and I didn't even choose pollution. I didn't even choose, garbage. I chose plastic bag bans. So the research question using those sources might be something like saying, how effective are plastic bag bans in combating the effects of climate change? See, that's a very specific research question that's not saying, how do we fix climate change? It's not saying, why do people, why do people have plastic bag bans? It's asking a open-ended but specific question. Now, research questions can take many forms. the topic that you've come up with is probably broad enough that you could ask all kinds of questions about it. And if you're not sure how to formulate your own question just off the top of your head, you may want to do some preliminary research on the topic to see what are the trends in this conversation, what kinds of questions are people asking, what are some of the things that seem like really hot button specific issues within the broader topic. And then when you actually develop your question, use open-ended how and why questions. Try to avoid questions that seem like they have a simple yes or no answer, because A, they probably don't have a simple yes or no answer if it's an adequately complex question, and B, if it's a complex question but you can just answer yes or no, then it's probably a factual question instead of a complicated analytical synthesis type question. So now that you have some options for a research question, once you have a draft research question, ask yourself the following questions. Is my research question clear? So it needs to be sensible because this is going to help you find your sources. Is my research question focused? You have 5 to 6 pages to write this essay, and so a given research question should be focused enough that you can answer it within that page limit. You have to be thorough, you have to be complete, you have to say everything that you can say on that topic using those sources in 6 pages. And finally, is my research question complex? Remember that your research question should not be something that can be answered with a simple 10-second Google or a simple yes or no. So these are the questions you need to ask yourself about your research question. So how do you get from research question to working thesis? We've talked about how to develop a working thesis, but ultimately your thesis will be the answer that you land on to your research question. And remember that if you're working with a sufficiently complex topic, you may not come to an answer. There may not be like one right answer to your research question, and that's okay. Your thesis can be partial. Your thesis can feel tentative. You can say, well, here's one solution, or here's what part of this is. Your thesis doesn't have to be some kind of grand pronouncement of capital T truth, right? But your working thesis should still ultimately answer your research question in some way. So things to think about as you're developing a working thesis. What do you want to persuade your readers of? What solution do you want to propose? What answer have you come to? What do you want to demonstrate through your comparison? What theoretical answer do you want to pose to your question? So again, an important note, I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's okay if your thesis changes. Between first, second, and third drafts, if your thesis changes, that's a-okay. So you've got to find 5 sources. The world is a big place. You might be asking yourself, where am I supposed to start? And I think I've said this already, but I'll say it again. This may be deeply heretical, but you should start with Wikipedia. If you're looking for sources, start with Wikipedia. Now, you should never, ever, 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 ever use Wikipedia as your source. But if you look at a Wikipedia page, if you look at an article and scroll all the way to the bottom, what you'll see is a bibliography section or a research, works cited section. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the Wikipedia page for essentially getting rid of single-use plastic bags. So I'm keeping with the same topic that I've been showing you as examples for the last week or so, because I think that for you to see an example, it's more useful to see the same topic kind of start to finish, which is why I'm showing you sort of the same topic over and over. So if you look at, there's a lot of information here. But unfortunately, because Wikipedia is more of an information aggregator, you cannot use Wikipedia as a source. You cannot. I cannot allow it. As a teacher and as someone who considers herself a woman of integrity, I simply cannot allow it. I'm sorry. Now, what you can and should use is if you scroll all the way to the bottom here, this is what you get. You get the reference section. And every single one of these, every blue link, is an article or a PDF. Or, here's a presidential decree. Here's an article about Britain. Here's an article about banning plastic bags in Guatemala. Here's some stuff about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So there are tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of resources. This page has 357 resources that you could use, and you only need 5. Now again, you want to focus on the resources that will help you answer your research question. But this is an amazing place to start. So I highly recommend using Wikipedia as a starting point for your research. But where are some other places you can look for sources? Start with the library. I know that right now you may not be able to use the physical library as you normally would, but start with their website. Use their search functions. Use Academic Search Complete, especially. And then look for books on your topic. If it's a nonfiction book, it will almost always have a bibliography or references or notes section. You can also play around with Google Books and Google Scholar. And again, what you're looking for is not a source that uses other sources. You want to look for those primary sources. So you're following the trail of citations. So if you find a book about your topic, unless it itself is some kind of primary research, try not to use it. Try to look for the things that it references and use those instead. Now that may not always be feasible because sometimes primary sources are things like really convoluted and kind of niche, like scientific studies. So it's okay if you're not using those things. But I want you to branch out and use more than just like 5 ABC News sources, right? Your sources should all come from different publications. So here are some other things that do make really good sources. Books, journal articles, again, use Academic Search Complete from the library website. Newspaper articles. If you're doing something that has a more historical bent, consider collections of letters, diaries. If you're doing something of a more humanities or pop culture kind of angle, edited collections of essays are great. Scholarly journals, you can use sound recordings, podcasts, radio shows, things like that. Film, TV, or video recordings can be good sources. Google Books, I've already mentioned, magazines. Any of these genres can be amazing sources if they are highly relevant to your topic. So your first step before you do any kind of writing at all is to collect as many useful looking sources as possible. And the way that you collect and organize these sources is you often to use an annotated bibliography. So an annotated bibliography doesn't just give you access to your sources, but it helps you keep track of what each source says and how you intend to use it in your paper. So when you write your annotated bibliography, you should start by writing down the MLA style citation for the source, right? So exactly like you do on your Works Cited page. And remember, use Purdue OWL if you don't remember how to do those citations. Then after that, you write a short paragraph, just less than 150 words, that describes and analyzes the source. So it's a little bit of just a brief couple sentence summary, and then a couple sentences analyzing how useful it is, how good it will be for your research, how you might use it, things like that. So this short paragraph can include several things, and you should tailor it to suit your needs. Like I said, it should briefly describe the subject and argument of the source, but you can also comment on the intended audience, evaluate the credibility or effectiveness of the author and their piece. You can compare and contrast it to another source, or you can explain how it will be of use to your own work. You can also do all of these things. But remember that the purpose of writing this annotation is to give yourself a leg up so that when you come to actually write the paper, you can just look at your annotation and say, oh, this source would be good because I was thinking about using it in this way. I'm going to use it to talk about how this author is not at all credible, or I'm going to use it to talk about, the audience of this topic. I'm going to contrast it to this other source. So this annotation is for you. These are research notes to help you use these sources effectively. So the annotation should be part summary and part analysis, But what type of analysis you do should depend on your own needs in terms of this paper. So I've included several resources for annotated bibliographies on the Canvas page. They're all under the synthesis module. And if you have any questions, as always, please email me.